Hey, welcome back, folks. It is Comics Now on Patreon once again, and last time you heard us talking about 2011's Green Lantern film. Today we are going to talk about a film that is different than that film, but possibly similarly received to that film, and that is 2003's Daredevil film starring Ben Affleck as Matt Murdock, Daredevil, Jennifer Garner as Elektra Nachios, which sounds like an appetizer, and we've got Colin Farrell as Bullseye, and yeah, a few other people as other people.
Michael Clark Duncan as Kingpin.
Yes, 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 yes. Very notable. He was also, of course, in Green Lantern.
It's
Uh,
Kilowog. Yeah.
yes, yes. King Pinawag Laga. Anyway, Jay, why don't you talk?
Yeah. I'm sure you've heard of this film if you have not actually seen it. It came in a time, and I mean this as respectfully as possible, but in the star Ben Affleck's career, where his he wasn't exactly shining brightly. He had a couple of quite a few actually just misfires and panned films. This one included, but I believe in just reading about it over the years, the reason that Affleck took on the role in this is he always wanted to play Batman, never thought he'd get the opportunity to, so he figured Daredevil was probably the the next best that he could do if it was offered to him. It was not incredibly well received, but at the same time, it's I don't think it has been panned, and its legacy isn't as bad as other comic films from around the same time. And it almost seems to be forgotten in some circles, at least until you bring up the fact that there was a Daredevil film. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it a couple of times at this point. Most recently, just a few weeks ago, when I watched it again for it, and this is a movie I've never really disliked or even hated. I can recognize that it's not great. Um, I don't think it is kind of like the Green Lantern movie. I don't think it's as bad as its reputation would have you believe. It's not great, but it's also better than some of the other comic book films that came around out around the same time. Uh, if nothing else, it's at least it, ironically enjoyable as a time capsule of a very specific moment in pop culture for a couple of reasons. But I mean, there are some dubious casting choices, and the plot isn't exactly great. But I mean, there's some good stuff here. It's an enjoyable enough movie. Um, I mean, as I've come to appreciate Daredevil more and more over the past couple of years, uh, I almost enjoy it more just because it's like it's one of those things like, you know, in the least condescending and patronizing way that I could possibly say this, you know, they tried and to varying degrees either succeeded or failed. But yeah, the bottom line, I don't hate this movie, but I don't love it either.
I don't hate it either. I used to really enjoy it. I think it's probably because it's a movie that my wife and I saw fairly early in our relationship together. Um,
That can
and
always help.
yeah, I mean, we had been married for maybe a year or two when this movie came out, and we enjoyed watching it together. I wasn't into comics at the time and didn't really know squat about Daredevil, so things like Bullseye or other elements that they might have distorted from the comics were not potentially troublesome to me. Um, but watching it again, uh, I can appreciate some of the attempts at visual storytelling in here, but other visuals, like almost every fight scene, um, anytime Daredevil is running, is really awkward. Um, and there is quite a bit of cheese as
Oh yes.
well, especially with Colin Farrell. Um,
like I said, if nothing else, it can be enjoyed ironically as one of the most 2003 motion pictures that has ever been made.
Yeah, I think the worst thing in this movie, and if I've got to pick something where it's like this is where I think they missed the hardest, um, is with Elektra, and trying to make Elektra, trying to trying to justify who Elektra is as a character in the comics by giving her this tragic backstory.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I like Jennifer Garner as an actress, and she seems like a very nice, genuine, pleasant person as well. It's just she just was miscast in this movie, is what it was. I think this is the time that like Alias was really popular, so they probably wanted to capitalize on a name that people would know. Um, and yeah, I mean, just her performance, the way the character was written, was not great. To your point, though, a lot of the best aspects of this movie are some of the interesting visual choices they took. Um, like when young Matt is first learning about how to use his, radar sense, and even in articles that you'd see people write about good scenes in bad comic book movies. The scene where they're in the rain and he can see her by the raindrops hitting her face.
Yep.
That is a very, I mean, it's a very well directed and well visualized scene.
Sure, or even him at the very beginning, and then later in the film, clutching around the cross atop the church, and then falling down when he's trying to lower himself, falling down into the church. Like, to me, that's just really strong visual stuff and very strong Daredevil visual stuff.
Yeah, I think the that opening fight in the bar actually isn't a terribly photographed or choreographed fight scene. It's still, I mean, you can see a lot of the the wire showing and everything, so it's not seamless, but it's not bad. I mean, it's an okay introduction to Daredevil, his fighting style, and everything like that. But it's, I mean, the playground fight is awful.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah, there's no two ways about it. I mean, it is poorly choreographed and it's incredibly corny too. And the fight between Matt and Kingpin toward the end isn't too bad. But even then, I mean, a lot of it probably the movie could have used a more confident hand in directing, which they, sadly didn't have. But again, there are some things that were okay. Like, you watched I think I've really only seen the director's cut of the movie. I may have seen the theatrical cut once just to say that I have and to see what the differences were. But I think I've seen the movie maybe like 4 times, and 3 of those times were the director's cut. So I forget what wasn't in the theatrical cut. Like, a lot of the stuff with his dad was still in the theatrical cut, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
I think those scenes are really effective too. With what was it, David Keith as a Jack Murdock.
I like him way better as Jack Murdock than who they got on the Netflix series. I think, I
don't even remember who they had on the Netflix series.
He's not a bad actor. It's just, I just think he was the wrong choice visually. I think of Jack Murdock probably in no small part because of an artist like John Romita Jr. I think of Jack Murdock as being fairly bulky.
Yeah. I mean, he was a heavyweight boxer, so of course he would be. And I mean, he was supposed to be later on in his years as well. So even when they pack on mass, it's not going to be lean, muscle. It's going to be, brute, brick house kind
beef.
Yeah, exactly. Just because the way the body changes over years. But I mean, there are parts of it that are effective. It's just the the things that don't work that really curtail it. But even then, it's like a well-intentioned movie, and it was just playing with the toys that everyone thought they had to play with. Then I would don't hate me for this, anybody, but I would almost compare it to almost the same type of movie as the original Raimi Spider-Man. But whereas that has, I mean, it's dated and some aspects of it are, corny and haven't exactly aged well, but it's still an emotionally involving movie, and it's still able to overcome any of its shortcomings just by being a solid, well-made movie. Daredevil has the same kind of dated cheese with like the soundtrack, some of the visual choices. Again, I say the soundtrack, and and even the not even limitations, but again, just what was expected from these types of movies at that time. Nobody was really going for much innovation. I mean, not to slight, the filmmakers or anything, but they weren't trying to be revolutionary with these movies. They were just trying to, make, a solidly entertaining couple of bucks off of properties that were owned by the studios. And there are much worse, movies that came around before or, after. I mean, Catwoman came out a year later, and it is the worst comic book movie I've ever seen, and that has ever been made. Elektra, I think, came out like 2 or 3 years later. It is a much worse movie than this. Even Steel came out, 5 or 6 years before, and it is a much worse movie than this is. So it is not anywhere near the bottom of the barrel of comic book movies. Time hasn't exactly been kind to it, but to a lesser degree, I would say that the same reason Batman and Robin is enjoyable to watch, like almost in spite of itself, Daredevil is enjoyable to watch almost in spite of itself.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's I mean, I don't know. I guess I think it's a little less watchable lately. When I watched it this time, I did have significantly less enjoyment, but I would watch it again. I don't know. Some of the things that they got wrong to me are head scratchers. So one of the things I think that they got wrong is the suit. Okay, and the reason why I say it's a head scratcher that they got the suit wrong is because they actually almost got it right.
Yeah.
But they just had these little modifications that if your concern is that the comic book suit is going to look ridiculous, right? And the way you solve that problem is just by making it a little bit darker, and then by having a zip open top and having him have the collar popped. Like that doesn't take it away. But like they've got a fairly faithful mask with the horns and everything like that. Way better mask than on the Netflix series. But they totally just botch it up at the collar area. Kingpin, right? You would think if you are going to put Kingpin in the movie and the final battle in the movie is going to be Daredevil versus Kingpin, you would give us more Kingpin. And right. Even though I'm certain that in today's internet, Michael Clark Duncan cast as Kingpin would be just the trigger of a lot of people being really upset. I enjoyed him in that role, and even now, being a comic book reader, yes, he doesn't look like White Kingpin in the comics, but personally, that doesn't really matter to me too much with a comic book film. It's not the comic book; it's an adaptation. I liked his Kingpin, and I would have liked to have seen more. Like let Bullseye be the one that you just see occasionally, or not at all.
Yeah, this was, I've come to appreciate Colin Farrell a little more over the years. Like around this time, I couldn't stand him for some reason. So like anything that
maybe because of Bullseye.
Well, I didn't even see this movie until like 7 or 8 years ago. But I mean, for some reason, I just didn't like Colin Farrell, and I would steer away from movies that he was in just because I just didn't like him. But it's one of those performances that, in retrospect, you almost wish you wish that either the movie mirrored him or he mirrored the movie, because he was in a completely different movie than everybody else. It was like I like to say, Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. It's like he was acting in a completely different movie than everybody else was, and I'm kind of curious to see what that movie is, because what he was doing, I don't really think matched what was going on in the rest of the film. And I mean, that's how Farrell was in this movie. Was just, he was just off on his own planet, and it was interesting just because it was so weird and bad. But I'm also curious if the rest of the movie had been at that same tonal level, or reverse that. What kind of role or what kind of performance he would have given if he had been more tonally in line with the film itself.
Yeah,
it's kind of a catch-22.
And you still could have had him do much of the same stuff. It's really just what he's doing with his face and the way he delivers some of his lines is just so over the top. You could still have him take care of the old lady on the airplane. I mean, all that stuff would still work, but he's so over the top.
What kind of killed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
plus, his leather jacket and bullseye scar on the forehead combo.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we need to beat this horse with a billy club any longer. It's kind of like the last movie we talked about, Green Lantern. It's enjoyable enough to watch. I don't hate it. It's not ultimately what I want in a film featuring this character, and as much as I loved the Netflix series, I think a standalone Daredevil film with a costume that doesn't look like body armor is totally doable and highly desirable, and I really hope that they give us what we deserve.
Yeah. Did you notice Taika Waititi in this one?
I hate you.
He was not in this movie. But no, yeah, I mean, same page. It's enjoyable enough. I'll eventually watch it again. It's yeah. Oh, but no, but then you got things that we even forgot to mention, like Jon Favreau as Foggy Nelson.
Oh yeah.
He was a good Foggy. And, it's one of those things that, the little things that they got right. It's just the big picture, missed the mark. Mm-hmm. It did not hit the bullseye like their own bullseye did not hit the bullseye.
Yes. He made me miss. He made me miss.
It's enjoyable enough. It's nowhere near the worst comic book movie ever. It's nowhere near the best comic book movie ever. But, it's fine. And I enjoyed revisiting it and talking about it as well.
I hesitate to say this because, well, there's a lot of baggage, but who might actually make a good Daredevil movie? I can't believe I'm saying this. Zack Snyder.
I mean, I could see it. Yeah.
I think, and here's why I think this, and I could be totally wrong, and he's probably not going to get the opportunity, and that'll probably be fine. But I feel like the street level nature of Daredevil could keep Snyder away from some of the stuff that he did with Superman and with BVS. Mm-hmm. And I think aesthetically, a Zack Snyder Daredevil film could be breathtaking.
Yeah, I mean, he can set up some shots. I would almost want him to be the cinematographer for a Daredevil movie, because even though in the context of the movies, I didn't necessarily like some of the, the nod to what, like La Pieta or whatever it is with the Madonna, with Superman being cradled by Lois and Wonder Woman. They were framed well in the context of the movie. I didn't think it worked, but they were framed well. So I mean, he can shoot films and has a good eye for the visuals. But I mean, I would want to see a Daredevil movie because, there's this movie and then there's the Daredevil TV show, which I generally enjoy the TV show. The series, the seasons, were too long by half.
Except for the final one, I think. I think the final one was actually just right.
The final one was far and away the best of the three. I still think that there were some things that they could have done with it that were better. But anyway, it's not about the show. But even then, it kind of leaned too far into just, grim and gritty. There was no joy in that world.
Sure.
Is too much.
Quick interjection. Am I the only one that thinks that that Agent Poindexter looks better in the Netflix Daredevil suit than Charlie Cox does?
No, I think I'm going to get grief for this. I don't love Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock.
I agree.
Like he's fine, but he's a little too. I mean, he's not even a big guy. I just think he's a little too broad. Like his frame's a little too broad for Matt. I think he makes the suit makes him look really stocky. So, but anyway, I completely agree. But I would want some of the visuals of the Frank Miller, David Mazzucchelli Born Again, but with the swashbuckling adventure of the Wade and Sandy Daredevil stuff. That's kind of that. It would be a good balance between the movie and the TV show. So I kind of hope that we get that next time Daredevil gets the big or small screen treatment. But,
Joe Johnston.
But who knows? Yes, that should be the answer for everything. Joe Johnston.
If you've seen Blade Runner 2049, different direction, but Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, he'd be good too. Anyway.
Christopher Nolan. Because I say Nolan for everything.
I mean, I'd watch a Christopher Nolan Daredevil movie. Why not? I think Christopher Nolan would go in the direction that Frank Miller went with the radar sense, not actually being a superpower, but just more of a sixth sense, using intuition and everything.
Yep.
I think that Nolan would do that. But anyway, it's an enjoyable movie. I hope we get better Daredevil in the future, but I mean, it's not as bad as it could have been, even with the worst parts of it.
And I say this with the utmost sincerity. We are going to get better Daredevil in the future in the comic book because comics are resuming, and Chip Zdarsky's next will be out very soon.
Yes, it will. So, stick around while we enjoy that and no doubt cover it on the main show, friends.
Yes. All right, folks. Well, we will talk to you again soon, and I'm sure so will Jay's son at some point. And thank you guys for your support, and we will see you on the flippity flop.
Yep, and if you have particular movies or comic books or TV shows or whatever you want us to cover like this, good or bad, just let us know. We figure, the main show would be more, about comics because we're comics now. But, for Patreon episodes, we think that maybe diving into...
Daddy, are you done?
Daddy, are you done?
Diving into, comics and... comic characters and other mediums would be pretty good for Patreon episodes. So let us know what you think, and see you later, guys.
All right.